We're going to get going. So welcome to Restorative Week. I always look forward to this week, as I know many of you do too. So I thought we would have a pretty quiet practice today. I'm not going to do a lot of talking, and we're going to do each posture for 4 to 5 minutes. And I kind of wanted to welcome you to bring the attention of your brain into your body, which is why I'm not going to talk a lot. Because oftentimes our body's doing one thing, our brain is doing another. And really the magic in yoga happens when we bring the two together. So we're going to attempt to bring the attention of the brain into the experience of the body. And if I talk a lot, that's going to be pulling you out of that experience. So we're going to do kind of long, quiet posture holds. And hopefully the outcome will be the stilling of the mind, which is the whole purpose of asana yoga. So let's just begin getting a little bit more centered. You can start sitting upright using support if you need to. Just taking some time to align yourself there. And we're just going to keep our hands down on our thighs, maybe closer to the hip creases just to keep your shoulders back. Palms are down. And then close your eyes and just look away from your brain. And just start to observe your breath. Starting to bring the attention of your brain, kind of shining that light into the body. Just try to gather information here about how you are this morning. Noticing the busyness of the mind. Noticing any sensations in your body. The rhythm of your breathing. Any tension or pain. Areas that are not really feeling any sensation, dull areas. Maybe noticing if there's any limitation to your breath, places the breath isn't quite moving in and out of, maybe the chest area, maybe the abdomen. And then taking a moment to just dig a little deeper and see if there's any intention you want to bring to this practice. Maybe it's simply presence. Maybe it's something else. Remembering B.K.S. Iyengar said we can treat every asana, every pose as a prayer. And then bringing your hands together in front of the heart. Inhaling to lift the chest, and on an exhale, bowing head to heart. And go ahead and lift your head, let your eyes come open, release your hands. Welcome, everyone. So we're going to start in legs up the wall pose, and I realize not everybody has wall space. You can use your chair for this one to support the lower legs, the seat of the chair. If you have a wall, you're going to want to come right up to the wall and put your legs kind of running vertically up the wall. But from either place, bring a little bit of an elevation to your lower back. So if you're using a chair or the wall, you still want to have just a little more support under the lower back. And also you might want something for your head. So we like to see the neck nice and long. So if your head down on the floor is kind of shortening your neck, then you'll want to put a blanket under your head. So I'm doing the chair setup, but like I said, feel free to do the wall. And the lower legs are supported on the chair. Once your legs are on the chair, they're going to separate. So don't do anything to resist that. Just let your legs become passive. And then the arms will open up, either position, wall or chair, just like you're in Shavasana. So 45 degrees from the torso. Palms are turned up. And then just make sure you feel like you've set yourself up in a way that's sustainable, that you're feeling in good alignment, the neck is comfortable, the chin is tilted down. And just kind of recognize the support you have under the lower back and encourage the belly just to kind of be cradled into the back with every exhale. And let the back sink into the blanket, into the floor with every exhale. And we can encourage the exhale here, just allowing it to completely flow out. Supporting the nervous system to get on board with the parasympathetic state, the relaxed state. When we elongate the exhale. And then just let the rest of these minutes here be the practice of the brain staying with your here and now experience. A little less than a minute to go. Staying with the breath, staying with the sensation. And begin to help yourself gently leave the pose. Taking just as much care to come out of the pose as you took to come into it. You want to roll off to your side from either version of that pose. And we'll be coming into a seated supported twist. So if you have a bolster, you should work with that. If you don't have a bolster, you could work with blankets or a combination of blankets and blocks. So because I know a lot of you don't have bolsters, I'm going to show you the setup for the blankets and blocks. Basically just building something that's substantial enough that you can support your body with. And then you'll sit with your right hip to the side of that. And then you'll turn and help yourself down. And hopefully you can get your left cheek to rest. If that doesn't feel great to you, Rest your right cheek. And then making a few final adjustments if you need to. We're going to hold each side of the twist for 2.5 minutes. As we keep the brain with the body, we can notice our relationship to our poses. We all have kind of a stopping point. And if we can sit with the pose and pay attention long enough, we might break through a few extra layers of tension where we might have before just kind of stopped deepening into the pose. Just another minute on this side. Use your hands against the floor to help bring your torso up. And you can either move your setup or move your body to prepare for a second side. This time the left hip will be against the short end of your setup. And you'll try to turn in an upright way before bringing yourself onto that surface. And then this time we want the right cheek to rest. And again, you can modify with the left cheek. And before I go into that quiet posture hold, just an idea to support keeping your attention is just enough sensation to prick the consciousness is the terms BKS Iyengar used. Just enough sensation to prick the consciousness. A reminder that restorative practice is not about stretching muscle. It's about nurturing and supporting organs, joints, and bones. Just another minute here. If the mind is wandering, you might need to do something physically to prick that consciousness awake again and bring it back to the body. And again, you're going to use your hands to help bring yourself out of it, just pressing the hands into the floor, inhaling yourself upright. And you can keep your setup for our next pose, which is reclining bound angle pose. But we're going to add the strap. And we'll make a loop with our strap that will contain the legs. So it's a pretty big loop that you can tighten once you have it around you. And you'll sit facing away from your setup with your feet meeting each other. And you'll take your loop over your head down to your waist, crossing the sacrum, and then just sliding a part of that loop under your toes, and then tightening off as much excess strap as you have so that you're in your kind of that right amount of sensation, not too much, not too little. And then I like to just scoot my butt away from the end of the setup a little bit to clear a space for the lower back. So my setup is hitting me right where my rib cage starts, and then my head comes down. And you might need a little bit of height under your head so that your chin tilts toward your chest. We don't want to have the chin really high and the forehead really low. We want to have the chin and chest coming together. And then your arms are as they would be in Shavasana. Palms up. And hopefully you're getting the feeling that your shoulders can just drape around the sides of your platform, whether it's a bolster or that block and blanket combination. I'm just treating the mind like, sometimes I call it the Mars rover. It's just wandering throughout the body, just kind of investigating. And with this deeper attention, maybe we can start to let go of constriction in the body, recognizing it's not necessary. You might have some discomfort with the lack of striving in these poses. Just notice that. So this is conscious rest. Oftentimes when we're resting, we are not conscious of our resting. And just another minute. To come out of the pose, you might be able to loosen your belt. You might be able to just slip one of your feet out and then the other. But find a way to take the feet out of the belt and then bring your feet wide, stepping onto your mat with the feet wide, and just let your knees come together. And take a few more moments, just releasing that external hip rotation and the stretch to the inner thighs. Then you're going to help yourself to either side as you come off of that setup. And you can take your belt and just put it aside. And we're going to come into 2 standing poses with head support. So this is what we want the chair for. We're going to first take standing forward bend, and then we're going to take wide standing forward bend. So you can work with the seat of the chair, and you'll put some support on the seat of the chair so that you have a comfortable surface for your head. And I'll just stay kind of bent over here so you can see me, because I know my camera is not in the right position. But you'll have your feet as wide as your chair legs, so that you have ample space for your lower back and your abdomen. And put your toes in front of your heels. And there's no wrong way for the arms here, so it's really what's going to support passivity in the shoulders. So you might cross your forearms. You might kind of rest on the backs of the forearms with your palms up. It's going to be different for everyone based on you and based on your chair. And then you can take your top of your head to your chair. So you might realize you need a little more height once you get there. You might add another blanket, you might add a block. Depends how much height you need. You can also rest your head on your own arms. Feel free to keep your knees slightly bent. The idea here is that we're as passive as can be. And make sure your legs are straight up and down, that you're not grabbing the toes or you're not all in your heels. So try to balance your feet. So we'll be 2 minutes in this pose and then 2 minutes in the other pose. Make sure to adjust the props if after some time you graduate out of the setup you started with. Maybe starting to notice the brain and the body having a dialogue. Just a half a minute to go. And we'll start to transition to the second forward bend where we separate the feet wider. So just start to, once you come halfway up, just grow the span between the feet. And then you can bring your head back down. You might notice you don't need as much height now that you're closer to the floor. And then we'll spend another 2 minutes in this pose. Bringing as much balance between the feet and the head as you can to keep your effort really minimized. And start to lift your head. And start to move your hands onto your chair, and you can walk the feet in closer together. And we're going to be moving into a supported Sphinx pose. So you can move your chair aside. And you have the option to work with blankets or a bolster to support your chest. So it's going to run horizontally in front of you, front of your abdomen, kind of right underneath the chest. So either the bolster or a couple of blankets stacked. And then you want to take care of your legs. So bring your feet almost to the edges of your mat. And then roll the small toes down and lift the inner thighs up so you feel really centered on your thighs. And we're going to take the elbows as far forward as they go and bring our hands together and put the forehead and thumbs together so that you have a prop to rest your head. And you will have to continue angling the tip of the tailbone down. So just kind of sustaining some effort there. But the rest of the body should be pretty settled in, pretty passive. With your head against your thumbs, just make sure your neck is crease free. So we want to have a fluid neckline. We don't want to pinch it off. So make sure to place your forehead in such a way that your neck is really fluid. And let the body talk to you. Notice how the breath shows up in this pose. Another minute here. If we've have a good pose going on, we should feel the consciousness is kind of globally spread throughout the body. If your attention is kind of caught up in one part of the body, there might be some adjustment that is needed there. We'll see if you can bring your attention within the entire inner body all at once. And slowly begin to lift your head away from your hands and begin to bring your hands to your mat or the floor. You're going to be transitioning to child's pose for 2 minutes. So you might use your bolster or blanket setup and just turn it as some support for your torso. You might bring your head or cheek down. I really want you to make this customized to what your body needs and wants. So you might prop your hands on blocks if that feels better in your shoulders or helps your pose somehow. You might arrange your blankets or bolster to better support your head. So really just make it custom fit to you. Your arms could be extended. They might be also tucked under you. We'll be here a couple minutes. So if you are resting one of your cheeks, I'll try to signal you when it's the halfway point. Otherwise, if you know your breath count per minute, you might know when to transition. Noticing if there's a plateau of experience and see if you can move through that plateau. Keeping the mind absorbed in this here and now sensate experience. You meet resistance, see if you can investigate a little further. Maybe finding one of those unnecessary tensions residing in the body. We all carry them. The body has a history of minor and not so minor traumas. And yoga is a chance to let go of some of those. So switch your cheek if you haven't done so already, if you're resting on your cheek. About 3 more breaths. And then you're going to gently lift your head, sliding your hands to help you come up, press down into the hands. So we're going to come into Sthita Bandha, Sarvangasana, where the hips and the feet are on the same elevation, and then the shoulders and head are down on the floor. So you might keep your bolster or blanket as the elevation for your hips and legs. You might just be fine with a simple block. And then your heels can get another block. And because this pose asks for the legs to stay kind of together, it will be more passive if you take your belt and just bind your thighs, like tighten up the straps so that your thighs are squeezed together. You won't have to work so hard to keep your heels on your block. And the strap can go anywhere from your knees to your hips, just not over the knees, not good for the knees. So if you're using the bolster or blanket setup, just make sure, like I said, that your shoulders and head are truly down on the floor, so that that setup is lifting your chest. And if you're using just a block, it's going to be right under your sacrum, so right behind the hips. And then you might have to be a little more dexterous with your feet so that you place the block just under your heels. And then you can unfold your arms and attempt to get the shoulders, the outer upper arms down by lifting your shoulder blades up toward your chest. And ideally, we have our chin really nice and close, snuggled up to the chest. So you might have to rock your head a few times to just kind of encourage that to happen. You want to keep your legs active and your toes right on top of your heels and your kneecaps looking straight up. And then close your eyes and point your gaze toward your cheeks. And to keep your attention from pooling in the lower back, remember the idea of global awareness is a sign of a good pose. Really move the tailbone into the body, into the soft tissue, up toward the ceiling, so that the lumbar becomes more neutral, more long. Every time you breathe in, the chest can rise. Every time you breathe out, the chin comes closer to the chest. We'll be here another minute and a half. If you know your breath count, for me, I have 11 breaths usually per minute. You might count off your own breath count, otherwise just wait for me to invite you out of the pose. But counting breaths can be another way to really keep yourself present. We're going to start to leave the pose now. So gently remove the feet from the elevation. And then you're going to slide toward your head side. Just leaving the legs, if you want to, on the blocker blankets. You can take the strap off of you. And just open the legs up to Baddha Konasana again, like you did earlier, just for a couple moments to relieve the effort of the legs. Now we'll do a pose that's very similar, but it's also different. Another way to keep the mind interested. So roll to your side. Now we have the center body elevated, but the heels are going to be on the ground. So again, you can work with your blankets. You're going to turn them sideways if you do. Or you can work with your block. So from either blanket setup or block setup, they're going to just be underneath your sacrum. And you're going to try to get the backs of the hands on the floor and not resting the hands a whole lot wider than the shoulders. If you want to make this a little less active, you could place your strap, the loop, around your wrists to hold your arms so you don't have to squeeze them in. Otherwise, just attempt to keep your arms a little bit more narrow than they want to be. And then you'll extend the legs one at a time, resting on the heels. And again, moving the tailbone up toward the ceiling. So just two different versions of our bridge pose. The gaze is pointed into the cheeks, and the chin and chest again are really starting to meet or find each other. This is more effortful, so we're only going to hold it a minute total. Just letting the body kind of feel and sense the difference between this pose and the last pose. Feet are wider, feet are lower. Just about 3 more breaths. Good. We'll go ahead and start to relax your arms, step your feet underneath your knees. And you're going to keep what you have going on under your hips. We're going to come into Urdhva Mukha Paschimottanasana, upward facing, Western facing hero pose. Not hero pose, sorry, Western facing forward bend. So go ahead and lift your feet from the floor one at a time. And you're going to right away notice that your sacrum kind of pulls away from whatever props you're using. So really try to keep your sacrum down, resist it down, even though it wants to roll with your legs. And then bring your arms overhead. If you can do straight arms, that'll be nicely supportive. You can extend out through the fingernails. Otherwise, modify your arms. You might do a wider arm. You might do a goalpost arm. So just consider your shoulders if you need to. But keeping the lower sacrum on your props, start to extend your legs. And they don't have to be stick straight. Just take them to your edge, your own physical edge. But the idea here is to let gravity bring the legs toward the chest. So in this pose where we're sitting, we're bringing the chest toward the thighs. Now we can kind of invert the pose and let gravity bring the thighs toward the chest. So keep your chin snuggled into your chest. Keep your arms kind of leveraging the feeling of support on the floor. And let the legs fall toward you, breath by breath, resisting the sacrum, lower sacrum down. So training our body really to be, training our mind really to be present in all sorts of somewhat stressful situations. All these poses are just inviting very specific and strategic stress into the body, keeping the mind present. Just another minute. Keeping your gaze pointed toward your cheeks. Go ahead and start to bend the knees. Begin to step your feet back to the floor one at a time. And once the feet are both down, then taking whatever you have underneath you out of the way. And you can gently roll to your side. And we're going to start to set up for pranayama. We're going to do reclining. So if you want to use your bolster, you could. Otherwise, you can create a 2-blanket setup where you kind of make the letters V with both blankets. So it's called a trifold, which gives the blanket evenness to both sides so you don't end up with a uneven blanket. And it's narrow enough that that it's going to benefit us for pranayama. We don't want it super wide. So you stagger those blankets if you're working with blankets. If you're working with a bolster, just put one extra blanket over the bolster for your head to have enough height. And then make sure you're warm enough, because the last thing we want is to go deeper into our kind of internal experience and just have the outside world saying, oh, I'm so cold, I wish I had a blanket. So just take care of that right away, cover up or grab a sweater. And if you have the 2 blankets set up, the first layer of blanket is going to support the lumbar. And then the next height of blanket, which should be 2 blankets, is going to start at the rib cage. And then you'll take whatever amount of height you need under the head so that your chin and chest come together. Because when we do pranayama seated, as it is classically taught, the chest and chin are together to keep the highest aperture of the spine sealed to kind of contain the energy of the spine. So once you have your upper body as it should be, then make sure your legs are spread so that your feet can just fall out to the sides. And take a moment to bring the shoulders down and the shoulder blades into the chest. And you're just going to start by observing your breath, which is Ujjayi 1. It's breath observation without any restraints on the breath. Yama means restraint. So prana is energy, yama, restraint. So Ujjayi 1 is just observing prana, which is just observing breath. We're going to be practicing Ujjayi exhalation today. So a couple things before we get going. We don't want to harden the abdomen when we're controlling or restraining the outflow of breath. But you do want to imagine that you only have a tiny little air hole escape. So the breath leaves the body really slowly. You constrict the muscle in the back of the throat lightly enough that you can create kind of an ocean sounding breath. Ujjayi means victorious breath. And you can just kind of find that muscle right now. And it's the same muscle we use to cough or clear the throat, except it's not as ballistic of an action. So it's a softer control of the muscle in the back of the throat. And so you want to avoid a rippling sound. That might mean you're kind of over pushing, over exerting. It's a very subtle practice. Most pranayamas are. So we'll start just with a normal inhale, normal exhale, and another normal inhale. And then just taking your first Ujjayi breath out. Normal breath in, normal breath out. Normal breath in. And repeating, but if you need another full cycle of Ujjayi 1, easy breathing, do that. So we never want to agitate the brain. The whole idea of pranayama is to take us deeper into the quieting, stilling experience that the asana portion, the pose portion of our practice has paved the way for. You're self-guiding at this point, determining when those attempts at the Ujjayi out-breath are going to happen. And it might be that you're able to go every exhale with Ujjayi out-breath. The chest should not sink when you're exhaling. The chest should remain lifted. You're going to find your way back to Ujjayi 1 and just take a few more moments just to witness how the breath shows up without any willful act on your part. And then you're going to make simple movements to remove your pranayama supports, always taking just a few moments to put the lung tissue back to neutral. So you're flat on the ground, you might just still have a head support. And of course, in Shavasana, this is zero effort with body, with breath, with brain. So we're just consciously witnessing whatever the residuals are from this practice. And welcome anybody who would like to stay longer to do so. If you are going to leave the pose, you can start to bring small movement back into the body. Through the fingers, through the toes. The head might rock from side to side. And finding a way to move to one side. And then from side lying, coming to seated. And once you're seated, taking a few moments to sit quietly. I thank you all for joining me this morning. Namaste. I'll see you all soon.